And welcome, everyone. It is another edition of the Spoiler Room. It is a new month here in June, which means we are kicking off a new theme month. I have been carrying this theme thing off now for almost a year and a half, and you could thank the guy who's sitting next to me today for that because, like, he's like, "Yeah, these are pretty cool, Mark. You should just keep it going." And I am very, I. It's a good thing I don't have Jedi around me because I'd be their bitch. Okay, it'd be like, "Here, go do, go mow my lawn." I'd be like, "Okay," because I am subject to suggestion. But yes, welcome to the Spoiler Room. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and grabbing your favorite drink. I have another Sunset Point Winery pouch. This one
Nice.
is Sunset Cove Mandarin Orange. So, a wine pouch, which, that is tasty. And yes, my right hand man is with me tonight. This movie did not send him go running and screaming. Folks, this is a man who interviews like artistes and folks who, you know, make deep films that are like lakes, that are slow moving rivers, that are beautiful and majestic. Those filmmakers make those films, and yet he's still here with us in the Spoiler Room to talk about 1985, the Savage Dawn. It's kicking off the Hendriksen Experience. Yes, all month we are going to be covering Lance Henriksen films, and I just happened to pick 4, and they're going to go in chronological order. Go figure. I really don't deliberately do that. It just so happens that I found 4 interesting films that we're going to cover for Mr. Henriksen. And if you're looking for what our schedule is, don't forget, go to specialmarkproductions.com. On the homepage, we have our live schedule of what movies we will be covering this month for the Henriksen Experience. Hello, Ian. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's the Henriksen Experience.
Henriksen. I keep saying Hendrix. It's Henriksen.
I know,
yes.
but it's a
it
great
is Henriksen.
title.
I got it spelt it right. I got it spelt right
Yes.
on the logo. So, and in the description, I've got Henriksen. So I also have a speech impediment. So there you go. But
I'm doing great, and I'm drinking ice water in case you're curious.
Okay.
I want to get some sleep tonight, so I'm not doing coffee. But no, that's the thing is, like, yes, I do interview artistes, as you call it, and watch like highfalutin films. But then this is balance because I treat it all with the same degree of seriousness, and that sometimes gets me into trouble. But not the case of this film. I can't wait to talk about Savage Dawn.
Savage Dawn. And since you can't wait, Ian, why don't you give our listeners the synopsis for Savage Dawn?
I meant to say I don't want to talk about this movie, Mark. So why don't you give the synopsis? No,
Too late.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Wait, this movie is not rated? Wow. Sorry, I've got IMDb pulled up and I just noticed.
You're assuming the MPAA even paid attention to this thing. Now, come
on. All right. It's a sleepy Arizona town, although there's Texas signage everywhere, I guess. Called Agua Dulce, which means, I guess, sweet water. And yeah, some biker thugs come in and tear up the place and kind of take over. And there's a lone drifter played by Lance Henriksen on a pretty sweet looking motorcycle who comes in and reconnects with his old war buddy played by George Kennedy. And they decide to fight back. And the odds are not exactly in their favor, considering this sleepy little town is right next to the world's worst run military base.
The worst military.
The bikers get tanks and machine guns, and wow, it's kind of like confession time. I've never seen The Warriors, but
really,
yeah, I know it's a blind spot, and I got to fix that. So yeah, come up with a way to watch The Warriors, Mark.
Okay, I will.
Have you covered The Warriors before?
We have not covered the Warriors yet. No.
Okay. Well, it's what I imagined the Warriors would be if they, crossed with Streets of Fire, without the music. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. And there's blood, there's nudity, there's all sorts of political incorrectness. There's a connection to Rob Zombie's Halloween, which I absolutely loved. Yeah, this movie has it all, including too much of a runtime. It could have lost about 15 minutes because I was checking Twitter by the end there, and I'm not ashamed, but I am kind of ashamed.
And tanks. We've got tanks in here. We've got this. Wow, this movie is just, I not seen this movie until now, but it was up on the list. I was looking for interesting. I wanted to look for different films that you don't normally hear people talk about. That's what we try to do here in the spoiler room as much as possible. Though we do cover some of the cult classics, but this one I had not seen before. But when I saw the trailer and I saw who was in this, I'm like, oh, this has gotta be this has gotta be on the list because it's so mind-blowing on who is in this film and what this film actually is. It reminded me a lot of, folks, if you're curious, it reminded me a lot of the film we covered last year, almost the same month during our Jean-Claude Van Damme month, our Hot Van Damme month, Inferno, where you had Jean-Claude Van Damme in the desert. And we covered that film. And this reminded me a bit of that, where he's a lone drifter. He comes to a town that's being ravaged by a gang, and he ends up.
Was that a Chuck Norris movie, or was that? And was
No,
that
that was Van Damme.
Did we talk about? I'm totally blanking on this.
You may not have been on that episode. I don't think you were on that. You can make that episode.
All right.
No, because that's with Danny Trejo giving Jean-Claude Van Damme a foot massage. Mr. Derek Carey was on that one. Yeah, I made a GIF.
I definitely did not see that.
I made a GIF, however you want to call it. I made it of that. If folks you're interested, I'll throw it up on the I'll throw it up on the Special Mark Productions webpage for you folks to download or do whatever you want with it. But yeah, it's
an
interesting
throw up in my mouth.
You should check it out. It's on YouTube for the free. So
wow.
Yeah.
I want to know what was going on with the 1980s, Mark, because this is one of 3 at least tank movies that I can think of. There was Tank with James Garner and C. Thomas Howell. I think it was like 83. There's this movie in 85. There was The Beast, which is like a Afghanistan war movie with Jason Patrick in like 88 or 89.
Right.
Was this like, because I know there's a whole thing with like the military where like if you sign up with them, they'll give you access to all sorts of like weaponry and vehicles and stuff. That's like how Michael Bay makes half of his movies. Was the 80s like the first time when the military was like, and we can give you tanks too?
I don't know. Let's not forget in 1943 they had tanks as well. So
well, yeah, because we were fighting a war.
Well, no, 1943, the movie with James Belushi, I think it was called
41.
41, excuse me,
okay.
1941.
43 was the never talked about sequel. No,
that's right. That was the never talked about sequel that's still sitting on a desk somewhere. No, 1941, excuse me. But you had tanks in there. I mean, yeah, tanks were prevalent quite a bit in the 80s. Usually older World War II tanks, which is what you had in here. I think it was an old Sherman tank they ended up having in Savage Dawn. But that's getting to the epic. That's getting to the epic conclusion of the film. We can't spoil it that far yet.
Sorry.
No, we've got there's some stuff in meat that happens and bone in between. And
there's a lot of boning in this movie.
There's a lot of bone. And let's pull to the side just for a moment and let's say, hey, Petty.
Hey.
So glad you could join us. He says, good night, Mark and Ian. It's a difficult movie to watch. Your comments will be very interesting. It's the mid 80s and we talk about mid 80s and I don't think people appreciate, some people or the younger folks, and this isn't a get off my lawn moment, it's just a simple fact, may appreciate the sheer volume of cheesy, really bad action films we had in the 80s. We have Mr. Ian Simmons. He froze on us. And he froze as if he's looks like he's a little drunk. Bear with us just one moment, folks. Looks like we may have lost Mr. Simmons. Ian, where'd you go, sir? So Savage Dawn is definitely one that is one of those many bad action films. There he is. Oh, he's back now.
Sorry, everything went dark and then I got the spinning wheel. I don't know if that's something on my side, probably. Sorry about that.
Who knows? It's the internet. We're at the mercy of technology. So anyway,
so you were talking about 80s, like weird 80s inappropriate
action
stuff.
Films. Yeah, well, just not just inappropriate, but I mean bad action film. It was like everybody in the 80s was making, if it wasn't horror, it was action films. B-movie action films were all over the place. And this is definitely one of those. And the cast that they have in here, you would think this film would be a little bit more solid than it is. Now, I found it, I found some charm to it. I did find it entertaining. Didn't quite check out, but at the same time, this was like a great value action film. The one that it's trying, and it's kind of painful for me. And I love to hear what you thought. But for me, some of these, many of the actors in here, I've seen them in better stuff and seen them in this film. It's like when you get them all together, it's like, how do you kind of whiff? How do you foul ball a film like this with these people in it?
I think part of it is well, I mean, this is going to sound really obvious, but I think part of it comes down to the writing and direction.
Well, yeah.
Like directing wise, there's an establishing shot sort of Lance Henriksen's character, Stryker, that I love.
How many strikers do we get in the 80s? We've got so many
Stryker. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, I love Airplane. But like he pulls up to this gas station and this guy is pumping his gas, and then the three hoodlums pull up and start molesting the gas station attendant's daughter, wife, something or other. I love the framing of this scene because we see this like kind of assault taking place, and then it's like a really wide shot, and you see Lance Henriksen kind of from the back off to the side, and he's just kind of sitting there like trying to figure out what he wants to do. I'm like, I'm just here to get gas.
I really don't want this. Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting because we see that kind of come back around a little while later where he's out riding his motorcycle with this young kid, Danny, who is the son of George Kennedy's character, I think. Son or just a townie, I don't remember. Son.
He's a son. Well, he calls him son. Whether or not it's his actual son, it's hard to say.
It's probably a son. And then the girl who's somehow not Helen Slater is the daughter. I don't know. But like, I seriously thought it was Helen Slater for like the first 5 minutes. I'm like, wait, that's not her. But anyway, they're out riding in the motorcycle in the desert, and they happen to be up on a ridge, and they look down and they see a young couple who's having car trouble, and the motorcycle gang rides up on them, and they get out, or they get off their bikes, and they start harassing the people. And of course, because it's the 1980s and you have an attractive woman in your movie, she has to have her top violently ripped off. And the actress, I don't remember her name, but she would pop up later in Friday the 13th, The New Blood. She was a girl who got thrown out the window. But the interesting thing about that scene is it's a scene we've seen a million times, where the good guy comes across the hoodlums who's harassing someone. He steps in and gets in a fight, kind of like what happened with the gas station. But no, Stryker says to the boys, like, are you going to go do something? And he's like, no, it's like 25 against 1. And he's like, oh, it's 25 against 2. And then Stryker hands him this knife and he says, go for it. And the kid's like, yeah, you're right. And they just ride away.
he tosses the knife on the ground and they ride away. Yeah.
These people are probably both going to be raped and murdered in the desert, and they just drive away. It's something I wasn't expecting. So there's a lot of good stuff in this movie, but it does come, like, the direction. The negative point, a good example, is the introduction to this little town of Agua Dulce. You see the kid Willard, I think, or the man who's he's got some mental challenges. He's got a little doll with him, and we're following him as he's walking through the town. And we get this great, like, expensive looking crane shot where it starts on the ground and it's pulling back, and then it starts pulling back and up, and then it just keeps going up and away. Like, wait, is the camera leaving the movie? Because he's like starting to talk to people. I can't hear what he's saying.
Well, they only had the crane for about 20 minutes, so you have to get that shot and go,
I guess.
Yeah, camera work in here was weird. You could tell they were shooting this. I'm guessing most of the budget went to, well, they did have, like I said, the army surplus they raided, tank and a couple of armored vehicles, but I would suspect it went to mostly this cast. Because again, this is a cast, while it may not be your top bank A-listers of the 80s, these are all known names. The top like 5, 6 people in this film are all known names, not just Lance, but Richard Lynch is in here. Karen Black is in here. I mean,
William Forsythe, who,
William
yeah.
Forsythe is in
Well, I don't
here.
know if he was a name at this point. I'm not really familiar with his work, before a certain point. I think the first thing I'd seen him when it was career opportunities. That
Yeah,
was 6 years after this, but
no, but
yeah.
I mean, so you've got talent in here. And so you're right. This is one of those prime cases where it does kind of boil down to writing and direction. And writing, I think you mentioned, you bring up a good point. It's called Savage Dawn, for one. So it's savage. I mean, this gang is your classic 80s gang. I mean, these guys take the gang members from Death Wish, like 2 or 1,
Yes,
at the
yeah.
end, take those gangs and put them, run them through the desert on motorcycles. And that's these guys. These guys are like, these are the guys. How they looked were like the not descendants, the ancestors of the guys in Mad Max. Okay, these are this whole gang is like the Mad Max grandfathers of the gang members we saw in Mad Max.
Yeah, and they've all got these great kind of bizarre looks to them. You've got the one guy who looks like he's in a hair metal band. The other guy
Yeah,
who looks, he looks like Spider Jerusalem, like from Transmetropolitan. You got the other guy who's just a big, brutish biker dude with like Nazi tats all over him. You've got the one dude who plays Big Zero. The guy who
yeah,
kills Sam Kinison is in this movie.
Mickey Jones.
Yeah,
He,
he was. I knew him from the TV show V.
yeah,
He played
too. Yeah,
Chris. Yeah.
hmm yeah. Mickey
Yeah, it
Jones
was nice
plays
to see him.
Zero.
Mhm. But yeah, and William Forsythe as the leader, and he's got like a limp. Um, he doesn't play like a charismatic leader. He's just like the toughest scumbag. That's the he's not incredibly smart. He's just incredibly mean, and he instills, I guess, fear. And it's exclusively fear. It's like, this is the guy who knows just enough to make sure that we can party and do whatever we want all the time, and
Mhm.
that's why he's the boss.
Well, and you get the impression too, he's saved a lot of their necks.
Mhm.
He's may not have been necessarily the smartest branch on the tree, like you said, or the most, cunning bad guy, but he has the respect of his whole gang because he's, pieced together his motorcycle gang from guys either he's rescued or picked up along the way and said, "Hey, you want to become a member of something?" Like Lost Souls type of thing. It's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of seeds of very interesting things in here. The Reluctant Hero by Mr. Lance Henriksen, played to the nth degree for once. I mean, this guy doesn't want to save anybody.
He's he's such a reluctant hero that he's only in this movie for like 20 minutes or something. Like, he disappears for, because I'm sad to say, this is one of the points where I checked out. Is there is a big heated conversation between he and George Kennedy's character about what to do with this town. And then, like, I kind of checked out, and a few minutes later there's the requisite scene where the kind of resistance is sneaking around the town, like setting traps and laying bombs, and then like everything starts going to hell and there's fights and explosions. Like, wait, wasn't Lance Henriksen in this movie? Like, oh wait, yeah, I forgot, he decided, you guys can go do what you want, I'm not getting any part of this. And we usually see that in a movie, but then he'll like relent at the last minute and go in and lead the raid. But no, the head resistance guy, he Han Solos it at the very end, showing up on that bike after everything's gone to hell.
Yeah, yeah, that's that whole third act. Oh, we'll definitely, yeah, we can talk about it now. Yeah, because folks, at one point, He does have to become the leader, the hero, when they're picking on George Kennedy's his buddy. What did they call him? Tick, I think it
Tick, yeah.
was. Yeah,
Mhm.
Tick. Tick's son was out with a young lady, and they were going to go on his. He said his bike, but he showed up in a four-wheeler. I don't get that, but whatever. Continuity.
Also, she's
You know,
like, "Meet me outside the church at
church.
7." I'm like, "Wait, 7 PM? Because no teenager is getting up at 7 AM for anything."
7 a.m. outside a church, which means she may have gone to early mass. And they get up on the bike, these two young teenagers who are lusting after each other pretty much. When we first are introduced to them, they're pretty much on each other instantly. And then, yeah, they get cornered by the motorcycle gang who had initially got run out by the townsfolk. Not even our hero, the townsfolk kind of chased them out. And that's how Karen Black, who ran the Tomcat bar, ended up with the gang for whatever reason. We don't know her
I kind of
name.
loved that. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I mean they don't spend a whole lot of time developing her quote unquote character. But I did like the idea of she just hated everybody in this town and they all hated her, and she saw a chance to go off with this biker gang, and so she just did.
So yeah, she just ends up running off with Pig Iron, aka William Forsythe, and becoming a member of the gang. In true Karen Black fashion. And every time we see her when they get the tank later on, she's straddling the cannon. She is
Yeah, it's
like
like a mobile throne. They're both riding on top of it and
she
swigging tequila.
she's just having fun, just straddling this cannon, like, yes, there's symbolism there, folks.
Wait, Mark, what do you mean? Could you explain it? No, but no, but that
Let me get the
scene,
crayons. No,
get the peach colored one. No,
yeah.
but the scene where Danny and the town girl are going off to ride around and they get
Hmm.
cornered by the biker gang. It's amazing because there's two different scenes in this film where something very loud and very urgent happens. Apparently, the protagonist doesn't hear anything that's going on
Hmm.
because when the biker gang confronts Danny and the girl, she's screaming, he's fighting, like hitting a guy with a shovel on the back, and then getting hog-tied to a motorcycle and then driven around. And at that point, fucking Stryker emerges from the barn. He's like,
He like,
"What? What?"
boom! He comes out
Right.
hero mode, but he comes out in hero mode after shit's hit the fan for a while. Um,
Yeah, and then like later on, I know I'm jumping ahead to the tank, but the tank blows up the bell tower of the church. And then like 2 minutes later, Richard Lynch emerges with a young townsgirl and they're both pulling up their pants or whatever. I'm like, "Did you really not hear what was a
well,
giant
they were in the
explosion?"
we learned later that the his quarters were in the basement area of the church. So,
I
there, and depending on what was going on, maybe they didn't. I mean, after all, Stryker and his girl, which oh, the 80s folks. Okay, let's set this up. Stryker rolls into town. He meets the townsfolk, the sheriff. All of a sudden, this young, attractive woman who is 15 years his younger, at least, comes up and just smacks one on the lips like they're dating or whatnot. And then he comes off and he goes, "Oh, Katie, wow, you've grown up." And I'm like sitting there going, "This is your best friend's daughter, and you two are all like becoming a couple fairly quickly. This is weird."
I don't remember the line, but he also said something. I swear to God, he said, "I haven't seen you since you were a little girl." I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah,
"Okay, groomer." Um,
Katie was a little kid the last time he saw her, and she came up, and the first thing she did was kiss him deeply in front of the menagerie of characters that make up this town, and they're all like, "Oh," and then she gets on the back and is going to make him a big juicy steak, and and I'm like, "Okay," and since you saw her when she was little, and then she's just all over him like constantly and getting jealous that he and Karen Black's character at one point exchanged eyes, and she was getting kind of jealous. And I'm like, he's literally old enough to be your dad. Okay, this is just
Possibly grandfather, because
grandfather.
that's the thing is like he and like Stryker and Tick are like best friends.
Yeah, they
I
served
know,
in CIA because they did Black Ops. So
right. I I got the feeling they were supposed to be contemporaries, but George Kennedy looks so much older than than Lance Henriksen. But let's just assume that they're supposed to be the same age. Like Katie could be like the granddaughter.
I it was one of those relationships which the thing is that relationship added nothing to the story. Like absolutely nothing. They didn't have to have them be romantical at all. It added nothing. She wasn't like kidnapped. She wasn't, she actually is part of the townsfolk plan to fight back once the biker gang get their tanks and take over the town. Her and, like you were saying, her and the townsfolk are setting up traps and stuff while our hero Stryker is, like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. To the point where she gets into a fight with with Rachel, Karen Black's character, to be a distraction. So with her
And
character, though, you look at it, there was no reason she needed to be romantically whatever with Stryker.
there was two things. One, I loved about that fight is that it's a cat fight in the sand and they're all like really going at it. But it was just a diversion so that the townsfolk could set up the rest of their explosions. And when things start going off, everyone scatters. And Katie is there in the sand, and I was waiting for her to kind of like get up and sneak away, like, haha, I fulfilled my purpose. But she's lying there crying and like really
Well,
freaked out because she'd just been in this, crazy fight. Like it
well,
was real for her, right?
Rachel also purple nurpled her. So
Right. But it's in a movie like this, the
yeah.
person who does the distraction, like they do like kind of a Bugs Bunny wink and they go away to like join the fight. She's freaked out. She's like running away. Which speaks to the savage nature of the movie. Um, but as far as why she's the love interest, I'll go back to what we started talking about. This is 1985. Modern movies, there's almost like an allergy to romance. You've got like two attractive, male and female leads in
Mhm.
a movie. They're going to end up like respecting each other at the end, or being friends or colleagues. Like nobody goes in for the big great kiss anymore. Rarely do they. But in the 80s, it was the exact opposite. They're like banging down like in frame two. So that's why that happened. But I agree with you. I think if it had just been, it could have still been Tick's daughter, but
Mhm.
he could have been like, she'd be like, oh, it's, I had a crush on you. He's like, yeah, but you were 12, like, I'm off murdering heads of like third world countries and you're, playing Barbies. Not going to happen.
And that's the thing, is she was a tough character too. She's a tough female character in here. At
Yeah.
one point, the gang shows up to confront Stryker, and he fights a couple of them, and George Kennedy just sits from his seat and looks on in amazement as
It's like
Lance
peeling
Stryker
peanuts or something, right?
as like Stryker one by one lures some of these guys down to steps to beat the crap out of them, which I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. But then there's a fire, a gunshot goes off and she's got a double barrel on these guys. And it's not the first time she gets tough and just pulls out the gun. And I'm like, she's an interesting character until you get her character around Stryker. Then all of a sudden she's like, hey, I
A
want to have
man.
a man, we even get we talk about horrible editing, and we keep coming back to it because there's some random fights that go on, not a whole lot. This film isn't that long, but there's parts where there's not a lot happening. Okay, so the big thing with the end here with the third act is probably the biggest thing where the most things happen. Um, at one point, she's like, I want to take you to this special place, and it's this tower that she built up on the hill that overlooks the city. Okay, now let's put this in context. While they're up there, the bikers gangs show up with their armored vehicles and tanks, and they start destroying the town. But that doesn't matter because they're up on here. And at one point in the scene, Lance has his shirt buttoned, and she's got her robe closed a bit more when they go up there, and it's like, oh, it's beautiful up here. And she's like, yeah. And you could tell that she brought him up here to seduce him in her high hide. Sorry, I just watched some of the Jurassic Park films. So anyway, but we cut to the gang and the motor, the armored vehicles and the tank blowing up. And then we cut back to our hero and the girl, and her robe is half open, his shirt's unbuttoned, and they're acting like the town isn't getting besieged by people down.
Well, I mean, we established that all these people are hard of hearing, Mark. I
They
mean,
must be.
they're just in the moment.
They
Um,
are.
yeah, the editing is really, kind of funny in this movie. It's not that well put together, but I will say I was surprised at some of the bloodletting and some of the practical gore, like the hair metal band guy. He gets strangled with a
Barbed wire.
barbed wire, and it's not just like, oh, he gets strangled with it like tied behind his neck. It's like, it's almost like
Stryker
at the
cuts
right
it.
right at the end of Hereditary, where Toni Collette is like sawing off her own head.
That's exactly what it reminded me of.
I want to pull over. I know it's your show here, sir, but we've got like a ton of
I was just going to get to him when you were finishing your thing about the barbed wire, which one of many things with Stryker, once he shows up in the hero mode, everybody allows him to do a one-on-one with any of the bad guys. I mean, he's, like you said, he's up on this armored vehicle, and he's barbed wiring, heredity treatment to the hair metal band guy. There's like 15 other bad guys in this gang, and they just let him. He hops around town, and people, there's only like one or two at a time, and he's just offing them, in typical old school action, where even though you have a gang, we got to fight them one at a time.
Yes, and it's ridiculous, but I'll say I will defend that strictly for one scene. It's a bit where he's fighting, and I was surprised that there was no music in this particular montage. But he's fighting two guys. It's kind of like him between two dudes, and he picks up a knife. And he stabs the one guy, and he like kind of gets the other guy with his elbow and turns around and stabs him through the stomach. And then as those two guys fall, a dude on a motorcycle drives by, and at this point he picks up an AK-47 and just throws it at the guy and locks him off his motorcycle. Just so careless. He's like,
he just threw it, and he didn't even throw it that hard. The guy didn't have to fall off the bike. It's just that, oh, you're the hero throwing the gun. Shit, I gotta fall off the bike now. So we've got Petty here commenting, and yes, we're gonna pull over a bit for these wonderful comments. And Petty says, the most surprising thing of all is that the protagonists were good actors. Indeed, I think that nobody can argue with George Kennedy or Lance Henriksen. So who should we blame for such a bad movie? And I think Ian, writing and directing, unfortunately, even some bad editing for a film like this, you could kind of let pass, but it is so sloppily put together. It's written. It is not funny. And then Petty also stated Richard Lynch was greatly wasted. He's an iconic actor of the 80s. A pity. And yeah, when I saw Richard Lynch's name in here, I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, when's he going to show up? I'm like, this film's only so long. And then he shows up as Creeper Preacher.
Slash mayor of the town.
Slash mayor. He's the Creeper Preacher slash mayor of the town, who creeps up against one of the bike ladies while they're watching the fight between the deputy and Savage Zero. And he's hitting on her. Like, seriously, I want to show you my pulpit. But
well, before we established what kind of character he was going to be, like I saw that he was the preacher, but when we first see him standing behind her,
right,
he did like a creepy, like the lizard lip thing, like
he started sniffing her hair.
Right. I'm like, wait, is that an actorly thing, or is that part of his character we don't know about yet? It turns out it was part of his character, possibly an actorly thing. But I'm not as familiar with Richard Lynch as other people are. But I didn't know, and I actually paused the movie because I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's a burn victim. And I know people who are big fans are going to be like, yeah, of course, Ian, why didn't you know this? But I actually looked up what happened to him. Do you know what happened to him?
Not offhand, no.
1967, he he dropped acid and lit himself on fire in Central Park.
Jesus.
Yeah, 70%
Wow.
of his body.
Well, I mean,
That's
if you're gonna do it, at least, wow.
Yeah, and he went on to, use that to kind of great advantage in playing like heavies and kind of iconic roles in movies later on. That was the Halloween connection for Rob Zombie I mentioned because he
Sure.
was the principal, Michael Myers' principal,
Mhm.
like young Michael Myers, and then Bill Forsythe played Michael Myers' like
Right.
abusive stepdad in that movie. So that was kind of nice to
See,
see.
I knew him from The Sword and the Sorcerer.
Mm.
If you watched that, he was in that. He was in a movie called The Last Ninja, which I watched. He was quite prevalent. He showed up in a lot of movies. He was in Invasion USA before he hit Savage Dawn. Same year, he was in Invasion USA. Night Force, The Barbarians, Little Nikita.
Bad Dreams from
Hmm.
'88, right? I remember
Bad
that was like
Dreams.
he
Yeah.
played a character named Harris, I think, and that was
Hmm.
like they were trying to like make the new Freddy Krueger. I never saw that
Yeah.
movie, but I remember it being a thing.
He was one of those two where he never unfortunately made it to be like a listing type, but he was steady work. He was another character actor in the 80s, like a number of them who are in this film who may not have had their name on the title marquee, but you would see them very prevalently in substantial roles in the film. Maybe not starring, but they had characters with speaking lines who actually had some play in the plot, like this character does here, because later on when the town is besieged, the preacher gets his chance to be with the girl, the woman, the biker woman who he was sniffing earlier, which I'm just like sitting here going, okay. um,
Well, he's got like a nice little love nest in the basement of
it,
this
it
church, and
it is, but
he
it just, the motivation of it was, oh well, because Pig Iron comes down later, and she's like, oh yeah, I did the preacher. Like, this is a big thing. Like, anybody in the town's really going to care anymore that the preacher did it with the biker.
Well,
you know
especially because within the same evening, like maybe an hour before, was when he had come out of that church after it
with
got
the
blown up
young
with the
woman.
young girl. Like, I would think that'd be more scandalous because she looked like way younger than that biker chick.
Yeah,
And
it was
also a town that small and a guy like that, there's no way that it's a big horrible
right.
secret everybody
So
knows.
I was just trying to figure out the motivation of our characters, but there was really not a whole lot of thought put in, I think, of our motivation of our characters. Barely any. First, they hint at the beginning of this competition that they have, where they have the deputy who fights everybody, who doesn't look like he could take a bunch of people on, but supposedly can, because he's beaten the crap out of pretty much everybody. Though you look at him, you're like, okay. Um,
Well,
but
help me out here because he's the
Mhm.
deputy, and we meet the sheriff later, who's kind of like this big, fat
Yeah,
coward. What happened to those two characters? Because again, this is me tuning out, but like at the end of the movie, I'm like, wait, what happened to the deputy and the sheriff? Did they die
it was hard to say. Well, the tank rolled into the jail cell,
into the jail?
and
Right.
the jail. I'm not sure what happened to them because we
Because I
don't
feel like
really.
they just disappeared. We didn't get like any spectacular deaths or anything with them.
I I don't remember seeing any spectacular deaths. I think they were in the firefight at it's hard to say. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
No, because they,
But
they they weren't because like at the very end, with all the pyrotechnics and stuff, there's the bit where George Kennedy's character gets shot, and it's pretty much just not Helen Slater and then Danny and a couple of, like the random like the Chinatown of this small town. Like
oh,
apparently they have like a big Chinatown community. They're like helping him like with his wheelchair, and then
uh,
George Kennedy gets shot, and then Henriksen shows up and. Then he decides to basically go after the last three, and that's where the Dawn part of Savage Dawn comes in. But yeah, the sheriff and the deputy just they just evaporate. They get raptured in the middle of this whole conflict.
they seem to. I honestly don't remember what happened to them offhand, and I don't know if I'd watch it again to see it, maybe.
It's free on Tubi.
But it is free on Tubi, so there is that. which is a better rip than the one that's on YouTube, just to let anyone know. But yeah, the biker scene, Petty mentions it as well. When the bikers came to the bar, I was praying that Sonny from a Bronx Tale movie would show up and say, "You Quan what? Now you can't leave."
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, a Bronx Tale. Another. Have you seen a Bronx Tale, Mark?
I have not actually. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my God, yes. I got the
I
reference,
know,
Petty. Very good.
I
But yeah,
know.
it's it 1993 Robert De
Hmm.
Niro movie. Um, yeah, check it out. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's one of those on my list I will see before I move on this mortal coil, hopefully. And then Petty's got one more. The movie has distant similarities to the movie Streets of Fire. It seems that it was customary at that time to have bikers as villains. Have reviewed Streets of Fire already? No, we haven't done Streets of Fire, but you do make up a good point that 80s bikers were the bad guys. Those were like in many of the, especially the B action films or just the B movies in general, bikers, they had been the villain staple for quite some time in B movies, but especially prevalent in the 80s. I mean, late 50s, early 60s too, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. We had, you've got what She Devils on Wheels or something. I forgot what. There's so many biker movies, but especially in the 80s. Yeah, bikers were kind of a thing. You even in the comedies, you'd have the biker gang as a joke. I think it was Police Academy
Yeah, with
was
Zed.
with Zed, yeah, who I think was played by Savage Zero in this. I'm not sure, but no,
No,
not
no, it
Zed,
was
but
Bobcat Goldthwait. But thanks
no,
for
no,
playing.
not Zed.
Yeah.
I mean not Zed, but one of the other bikers. I thought,
Oh, was it?
uh, but I'm not sure. I'm talking out of my ass at this point, but no, you're right. Bikers were prevalent, and they are here. And again, Mad Max influences. If you had a biker gang, they couldn't just be straight guys in leather. They had to be different characters. Like, not only did you have the big brute guy who was who was it called Meat Track. He was Savage Meat Track. Everybody was Savage because they were the Savages. The gang was the Savages. So you had Savage Zero, which was the big Nazi guy. You had Savage Spider, who looked like Paul. He looked like Paul from the Late Show, Paul Schaefer from the Late Show, or
Oh yeah, yes.
yeah, yeah, he looked quite a lot like him. Uh, you had all these people who had to have characters, and then yeah, but every bike gang had those. None of them could really just be a straight bike gang in most of these B action films. And maybe it's because bikes came cheap. And at the time, growing up in the 80s, one of the things that was prevalent were biker gangs. The Hell's Angels were the biggest, were the ones at first who were the real, oh, you don't run into Hell's Angels. They were big, leathery motorcycle gang that were supposedly bad, but then turned good. I guess they do humanitarian work or something now. I don't know. But it is true that motorcycle gangs seem to be those villains, and we get them here in all their caricatures. And speaking of caricatures, I did want to get to them. I'm glad you had mentioned them already. Now, the town, the reason the town is where it is we get some exposition from Tick about how it used to be a gold town. Okay, we're in the 80s, folks, but it was a gold town. It had gold, and you need a river, as he put it, you need a river to have gold, but the river dried up. So when the river dried up, the gold mine dried up, and now he was just waiting for this town to dry up, and he's trying to save the town from his basement of his manufactured barn where he's creating homemade explosives and doesn't really seem to be helping anybody. Anyway, he wants to help this town before it completely dries up to make amends for all the black ops stuff he and Stryker did. Which again, opportunity to explore some things, and we don't. They none of these guys have any type of actual drama to them. Stryker drinks a lot in this movie. He's always drinking, and then he's pulling off some great value Chuck Norris kung fu moves. Don't get me wrong, I love Lance Henriksen, but his moves were a bit something to be desired in this film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at, yeah, George Kennedy. I mean, I thought it was weird. Like, I don't remember if they established that he's in a wheelchair right away, because the first
No,
time
they
that,
didn't.
because when Stryker goes down to meet him, he's just sitting in his basement. I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, he's just, like, at his workbench or something." It's not until we see him at the bar later, it's like, "Oh, he's in an automated wheelchair." I'm convinced that was just George Kennedy like, "Look, you're paying me how much for this movie? Yeah, I'm gonna be sitting through this whole thing." I'm like,
I'm
"Okay,
gonna
we'll
be
write you
sitting.
into a wheelchair." Like, it's gonna be an extra 50 grand to get me to stand up.
But they do give him his moment too while they actually fight. The townsfolk start their fight back to the motorcycle gang.
Oh yeah, he's
Um,
great, and his character is great in this movie, and he does a lot from that chair. I was just making a joke that, like, it's such
yeah,
a low
no,
budget movie,
he's not
they
even.
couldn't pay him enough to
It,
stand up.
it's too hot out here. I am not walking. You could
Right.
you know you could have my character in a wheelchair. That way I can I can
And I love that it's a wheelchair that doesn't always work. I
work.
mean, and
Yeah.
it's not that it just, like, breaks down inopportune times. You get the feeling it's this kind of clunky thing that he has to maneuver, and he has to get out of some pretty tight situations.
Yeah, he does have to get in, and it doesn't always kick in right away. But he has his non-PC. Okay, it's a gold town in the 80s, but we are portraying a certain nationality in this film as if it's back in the gold mine, like transcontinental railroad
The
times,
1880s.
the
Yeah.
1880s, with the Asian community in this town complete with straw hats and robes and sandals for the majority of the folks. Now, a couple of the younger guys aren't dressed like that. The younger Asian Americans in this, but most of them, it was like, wow, really, really, they couldn't just be townsfolk. They have to have the hats and yeah.
I wonder about this sometimes, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak one way or the other about it, but I don't know how much of that would have been just stereotyping or blatant racism, or just the idea maybe the filmmakers researched this and said, well, you know, if considering where they were, and this is a town of, like,
Hmm.
probably immigrant, maybe first and second generation,
Sure.
Asian, Chinese
Hmm.
immigrants, maybe there would have been people who brought
Still
this,
had the
dress and
traditional, right,
customs and stuff over
right.
from the home country, versus, they're Chinese. They wear, like, straw hats and bathrobes, right? Yeah, just put some of them in there. Have them go da 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 da. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
because that's the
that's
impression I got watching the movie. I'm like, it's cartoonish, but I don't know if it's, like, mean spirited, because there's a possibility that it's not exactly cartoonish.
no, but with it being the '80s and the type of film this is,
But that's what I'm getting at is,
yeah,
yes, it
it's
is it the 80s are full of, stereotypical, portrayals, but have to, pull over and ask, are they
mm,
stereotypical because that's how we are considering them, or is it because, other
yeah,
factors? I don't know. I can't I have a hard
it's
time speaking to it. I'm conflicted.
it's really hard, though. They are What's interesting is this community that they have, the Asian American community in this town, seem to be completely ignored by the gang members, because these individuals help our heroes escape. They help set up some things, and the gang members seem to not even pay attention to them, because they're a bunch of the gang members you get are racist, or at least Zero with his Nazi tattoos on his elbow and such. So I thought that was
And
a
it ends up being to their detriment. Yeah,
right.
they discount them like, "Oh, they're just a bunch of Chinese guys." That's probably what they were thinking.
Which, again, it might be giving the writers too much credit for that, but during this epic final clash, it does play into it, of them saving the quote unquote heroes, the folks who were the distraction and such, and they're ignored by the gang members, possibly because they are. I mean, they don't really establish that, but you could think of, it's not that far of a hop to think, well, maybe it is because of who they were and who the gang was. They didn't think of they're all in one area of town, and they don't seem to be rocking any boats, so they'll just ignore them. So yeah,
You
you're
know,
right. It's
I'm thinking, Mark, could you remake this movie today? Because
you
I
could.
think I think
You,
there's a version of Savage Dawn that would really work. Instead of like wasting time on a lot of this bullshit padding, you could really flesh out some of the dynamics that are going on in this town. Because I sort maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention, but I feel like this Chinatown community of Agua Dulce was introduced during the chaos. Like I don't feel like it was set up really well.
no.
There's like a Native American community represented here, along with like the there's like the white folks.
The white
Um,
folks, the folks who left the circus. I mean, there's
right. But the Asian contingent of it is introduced way too late in the film. I feel like you could almost like come up with a new telling of this movie that sets up the dynamics of this town where they have to come together against this outside force, but they've got their own internal problems, like potentially even racially. Um, you know, I think that'd be really interesting to explore, and you could still have your exploitation revenge flick.
Yeah, you could. It would be interesting. Again, more nuggets. There's all kinds of these interesting nuggets and things in here against this very generic, very thin story with Stryker and Lance Henriksen doing his best to be the action hero. But again, everybody's acting their hearts out in this, and he's into this, but at the same time, I'm just not quite feeling it with his character, the way they set him up, because the way the fights go, it feels like they only had so much daylight to film them. So, because some of them, I'm just like, he would have never beat that guy, like, ever. Yeah, that guy is literally throwing himself as if, he got kicked harder than he did. Um,
It's a weird movie. I mean,
it
like
is. I
the
loved
like
it. That's what I loved about it, is that
yeah, I
it's
mean,
so weird.
I dug it. I mean, there was stuff that was really unexpected in here, like the big fight with Bill Forsyth's character towards the end, where I think he's on the tank, and there's like a
Yeah.
little like a
Mhm.
miniature gun, a miniature barrel that they're fighting over, and Henriksen gets like presses a button or pulls. I don't know how the hell this shit works, but
There's two levers inside that you could reach, and it launches these small projectiles that come out of the small cannons. Yeah, on the front of the tank.
so he gets to one and it kind of misfires, and he gets the other and just blows a hole in the back of William Forsythe, and that's his character death. There's no big like I'm the big boss villain, and that's what I kind of liked about this movie is they're just a menace that has to be cleaned up out of this town, and they do it. I do think that they should have ended it there. I appreciate that he decided to go after the last three kind of stragglers who are essentially the people that we began the movie with, but
Mhm.
that last 15 minutes drags on so much.
It does drag on, and yeah, it surprised me it kept going. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, now granted, Mr. Derek Carey out there, we love you. Lots of shitty dummies.
Oh, yes.
There is lots of shitty dummies in this movie, from whether or not you get Karen Black's character Rachel urging the tank to roll over Creeper Preacher Mayor, to the fight with Stryker and Spider, where he throws Spider off this staircase of this oil reserve, and it cuts to Shitty Dummy falling. There's so many. There's at least four shitty dummies in this film. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Thinking of
Yeah,
you, Mr. After Radio Z. Um,
I was thinking of him too. I raised a metaphorical glass of something alcoholic to Derek when I thought of that, or when I saw that. But yeah, it's what the whole problem is. There's like this extended chase. One of the bikers gets taken out by some spiky farm equipment, but they end up
yeah,
on this refinery, and Lance Henriksen takes forever to get up to this catwalk. And when he does, there's like a big reveal of the big dude on a motorcycle. How the
yeah.
hell did he get it up there?
Same way they walked. They showed that they could just ride these motorcycles wherever. Actually, I think it was an elevator. They didn't establish it, but it almost looked like it was an elevator.
Okay.
You couldn't quite tell, but it seemed like it was that, like a freight elevator or something, because there
Maybe
was.
because I didn't see much behind, and by this point I was like just waiting for the credits
But
to
yeah,
roll.
Spider reveals the door, and Meat Stack is behind there with the motorcycle and chases him across this bridge to where, again, poor editing, folks. Suddenly, Lance Stryker teleports to the side of the bridge. Like literally, he's being chased, and the bike gets closer. And the minute we cut, suddenly he's on the side of the bridge, and the motorcycle and Meat Stack drive off, and he tackles him. And then while he's fighting Meat Stack, Spider's got a gun, and he accidentally shoots. Well, not accidentally, but he actually shoots Stryker somewhere. Not quite sure where. A
Kind of like, and
shoulder,
yeah, because he's,
yeah.
and I liked that. There's one thing else I'll give this movie is, our protagonist is beaten and bloody by the end of it. He's got the
Yes, that
lovely
is true.
trail of blood coming out the ear. His chest is all fucked up. Yeah, and Spider goes over the side of the stairs, and then I did like, although I was kind of confused, and this comes down to editing. Meat sack, is that meat stack? Is that
Meat
what you're?
stack,
Okay.
yeah.
He ends up getting hoisted by a rope.
Well,
That's
because Stryker hid the rope under dirt.
right. Yeah, very wily coyote, this guy.
Oh, Wile E. Coyote. It was like Stryker was hoping Meat Stack would come down the stairs and stand in this one spot to where he could do this one thing.
And he does beautifully, but he gets strung up, and the rope is attached to a pulley that's attached to the winch on the car, and so he gets strung up, and he's like upside down and shooting at Stryker, or trying to, and he's like cursing like, "I'll get you, I'll be back. What are you gonna leave me here to die?" And then he finally lets the thing go all the way up, and the cut is like his body is starting to go up through like a ripped part of a grate at the top
Yeah.
of the refinery.
Mhm.
Are we meant to believe that he gets cut to ribbons, or that he's just gonna
Yeah.
hang there? I was confused.
No, you're meant, because the winch goes through the hole. You're meant to think that he gets pulled through there and he gets shredded,
Okay.
and then our man Stryker heads off into the dawn with his shot arm down the railway. He doesn't get back on any vehicle or anything. He decides to walk.
And wasn't this like the exact final shot of Death Wish 3 or 4, where Paul Kiersey is just blown up like the slum, and he's just like walking off into the sunset or
Yeah,
sunrise? Yeah.
yeah, it's like that. Or
It'd be funny if they ran into each other.
oh man, I want to see a Savage Dawn, Death Wish 8, Savage Dawn
Death
return.
Wish 8 Savage Dawn. We're
Yes,
onto it. You get that bronzy guy to do it.
the
Yeah.
Bronzy guy. We'll get Bronzy in. Oh wow! And Lance Henriksen can play a George Kennedy character then this time around, of sorts.
Oh, you've got it figured out, man.
I've got it
That's great.
figured out. We've
I do
got
want to
some
say,
gold.
before I guess we got to head out, I know, but like there's some great writing in this movie.
There is, as much as we've dogged on it. There is some great lines in here for sure.
What, like Stryker's introductory line when he's encountering the bikers, one of them says, "Don't touch me unless you love me."
Love me. I've got that quote as well. Don't touch me unless you love me.
And then he's got another one: "Saying you're sorry makes a man feel better." That's a greeting card right there. That's a Savage Dawn greeting card.
He's like literally quoting. He's literally quoting Hallmark.
And then the one secretary, the lady who gets molested by the road and probably killed with her boyfriend, she says, "I type one word per minute and it's usually misspelled."
Well, yeah, because you mentioned the couple, that this is the couple our hero decides not to help because he's outnumbered, and that was a surprise in a kind of refreshing way. He's like, "Yeah, no, I'm outnumbered. Fuck that."
I know, he reminded me a lot of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He did.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. There's too many people. I'm just gonna go over here and crawl under the sand.
I'm broken, you guys.
I'm
broken.
broken.
Sorry,
but they had a conversation between her and the man. The couple were having a conversation. And it turned out that, of course, he's married and she is his mistress, his young mistress, who he says is his secretary, and they're heading to Vegas because he is again an older gentleman with a younger woman. There seems to be a bit of a theme going on in this film too. I'm not sure if it's intentional, but it's, yeah, you're just like, okay, it's the 80s. Petty mentioned Marlon Brando was the first bad guy on a motorcycle in the movie The Wild One. Could it be?
Well, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, The Wild One was a big influential movie,
Mhm,
but when we were talking about what was it with motorcycles in the
yeah.
80s, actually, I thought about The Wild One, a movie, another one I have not seen. I got to brush up on my Brando, but you had this, you had Easy Rider.
Mhm,
There was a bunch of like, yeah, like you were talking about Hell's Angels kind of inspired things, and we're only 20, 30 years out from those kind of iconic biker movies. So yeah, there was a mystique about
mhm.
Streets of Fire is another one. The motorcycle gang.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird for us to look back on it now, but this is, we're almost 40 years out from where this was. So we're not, there was a different cultural zeitgeist back in the
Yeah.
80s.
Well, and it brought back for a while, it brought back for a while, the, uh, uh, in with, was it the Anarchy, the Brothers of Anarchy?
Sons of
There
Anarchy. Yeah.
Sons of Anarchy. There was that the motorcycle drama for a while that hit it big, kind of bringing it back to that kind of rogue motorcycle concept that we had seen in 70s and 80s and all the way up through 50s to the 80s, but definitely in the 80s. But yeah, it's I know this conversation was a bit random, but I mean it's not exactly a deep film. There's a lot of interesting stuff. We've got to talk about quick, and then we'll Petty. I will comment on your stuff there in a minute about stuff other than the film, but the best I will say as much as I have also said, well, the fight scenes weren't that impressive, just trying to buy Lance as being able to how he fights. The guys did not sell it they did not do Lance justice in this. The stunt guys or whatever he was fighting, they did not sell it very well. Let's put it that way. For the way they're supposed to sell it for him being the guy, they didn't sell it very well. But there's this wonderful fight about midway through where we mentioned earlier where the girlfriend wannabe, the Katie, she shows up with a shotgun. Before that, Stryker is fighting the gang members, and it is the most creative use of a rattlesnake I've ever seen.
The rattlesnake. I forgot about that.
Because he's fighting these guys and they're like, okay, we're gonna take him. And the one guy comes up with this chain, and Stryker just grabs a chain and knocks the guy down. And then he fights this other guy, and then this other guy knocks him over. And literally, there's this rattlesnake coiled up right by the feet of Stryker. And again, editing, they don't really cut away to like give you some drama with the snake or whatever. You just know it enough that it's there. Stryker gets knocked down. He sees the rattlesnake, grabs it by its head so its mouth stays open and fangs out, and shoves it on the neck of the gang guy.
It's beautiful, and that's for all of the wonkiness of this movie. That's why I say I would love for someone to remake this,
Yeah.
retain all the great stuff, and just get and even out the uneven
Even
bits.
balance it out a bit because yeah, they're and that's the way the lot of these B action 80s films were. They had a lot of like great moments and nuggets enough to keep it entertaining to just where you're like, okay, here's another fight. Oh shit, he just grabbed that rattlesnake and shoved it on the guy's neck.
It's kind of like the throat ripping scene in Roadhouse. It's
Yeah.
just like you take any old boring fight scene, but then you inject like just one little what the fuck moment. Like you almost have to rewind because you don't believe that you watched what you just saw.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Savage Dawn has some of those moments. It's tropish, it's cliche, it's not really handled well, and it's got awkward stuff in it, but there are a lot of also interesting nuggets in here,
Well,
from the waitresses who at the Tomcat wear little cat tails to the deputy who's a massive street fighter.
Yeah, and the sheriff who's like, yeah, it's just what he does. It's fine.
Yes.
But no, I do want to talk about Richard Lynch's death for a second
Yes.
because he's in the car. He's got two goons on either side of him, one with like a rocket launcher and the other one with like an M16. So he cannot leave and he's begging for his life. And then the tank drives over the car. It's not that just that it crushes him. It's he starts kicking the windshield to try and get out. He gets his leg out. He turns around and gets his front of his body out. And then what I loved is the physics of this thing. The tank is rolling over it, and as it gets to the main part of his body and he's peeling out through the broken glass, the tank tread actually works to scoop his body back in through the windshield, and then he gets crushed. And I'm like, this is beautiful.
Oh yeah, that was one of our many beautiful shitty dummy moments
Yes.
in this
But right
film.
up to the part we saw the shitty dummy, it was really well
Yeah,
handled.
they cut away to shitty dummy. You're like, oh, that's a shitty dummy.
Yeah.
So I will get to your questions, Penny, but I just want to wrap up our initial episode here. Savage Dawn. What do you say, Ian? Would you say people? I mean, it is free. Would you say people could watch it? Is it watchable?
It's very watchable. I mean, it's one of those things where if you're watching it and it gets a little slow and you're thinking, I've never seen this before, but I feel like I could fast forward through this part. Whatever part you're thinking of, the answer is yes. Fast forward until you feel like you should start watching it again, and you'll be just fine. The movie will be an hour and a half instead of the hour and 43 minutes that it
Yeah,
actually
it
is.
it could have been trimmed, and most of the trimming could have been the whole relationship thing between, Stryker and Katie. Really, they could have, if they cut that out, this would have been a tight 90 minutes of just him fighting biker guys and them raiding the worst National Guard post ever, who fall for a couple of ladies in distress, quote unquote, and thinking with some other guns. And yeah, that just the worst soldiers. They're not even soldiers. I'm like, they play these guys like they're rent-a-cops, not like they're actual National Guardsmen.
And I don't know much about military dress, but these guys, I know they're just like gatekeepers, but they look like they're dressed like full colonels and shit. I'm
They
like, what are
are.
you doing?
They are. I think they just rented whatever military costume they could, because the one guy's got airborne on the patch. It says airborne. The older gentleman who is thinking of taking these lovely ladies and helping them and providing protection and service. The patch clearly on it's not the vinegar syndrome, it's the one on Tubi, which is imagined the same transfer that vinegar syndrome came out with, which is a very cleaned up copy. You could actually read the words which say airborne on it. I'm like, there is no way that guy is airborne.
Well, he was trying to get it up, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But
he was,
yeah,
yeah.
oh. But yeah, I would recommend this movie.
Yeah.
Not honestly, not necessarily as a Lance Henriksen movie because
Mhm.
he's not in it that much. And when he is in it, like that whole scene where he just, he sees that Tick is dead. It's the moment in all of these movies where the best friend, the sidekick, gets, sidelined or murdered and gives the hero the motivation to go stop the bad guys. It's that moment where Henriksen is supposed to kind of like look kind of somber and then do like the kind of like head lifts up and you see the one eyebrow, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go get this guy. He's just got this blank expression as if it's like 11:59 p.m. before payday and he's watching the clock to see when the bank transfer is going to go through. It's just a blank expression signifying nothing. And then he just turns around, like walks out of the barn.
Yeah, it's interesting. I gotta say as well, if you like your B cheesy 80s action film, sure, pop it in. Have some folks with you if you can, or some alcohol as well. It's watchable, it's got its moments. It's if you're familiar with this type of film, it's not going to completely have you check out at the same time of this type of film. It's one of the lower tier ones of that. It tries, you could tell. And I love the spirit. That's the thing. I love the spirit of this. All these actors, Petty is right, with all these actors in here for our protagonists and even the antagonists, everybody's giving it them all, their all. It's just the fact that the director, Simon Nocturne, This was his last film. Before this, he did things like The Girl Grabbers, The Hex and Sex, the Broad, Broad Coalition, Snuff, Shacking Up, and a movie called Silent Madness. So not exactly, yeah. Those are the types of Love in 72. So this is not a director exactly known for his action prowess.
I didn't look up his filmography, but you've put everything into perfect perspective for me
Doesn't
there,
it?
Mark.
It
Just
puts it
rattling
in
off those titles.
it
Like,
puts it in complete perspective. So
I get it now.
thank you, my viewers and my live commentators. Again, Petty, stick around. We will hang a bit, but first we're going to do the wrap up for the main show here. Ian, as always, licensed to shill, sir. And also just shout out to Kara. She was going to be on tonight, couldn't make it, but you are here with us in spirit. But Ian, go ahead. Hashtag licensed to shill. The floor is, as always, yours, sir.
Thank you. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I'm also on YouTube. You look up Kicking the Seat on YouTube, and I do movie reviews and interviews and live streams. And I've got a live stream coming up this Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. Central. We'll be talking about Jurassic World Dominion, which is, I'm sure, going to light the world on fire. So yeah, join
Light
us.
something on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, check that out. And if you listen to Mark's live or his Patreon show earlier, we were talking about all things Star Wars and Obi-Wan and something that happened on my podcast last week. And there'll be some resolution to that tomorrow with the new episode of Don't Read the Comments, where I read reader comments. And Petty, you are going to be part of that, actually. So thank you.
I keep telling him don't, but I said
you inspired the series.
I said don't read the comments, and it suddenly inspired a series. So that shows you, folks, just, but I thank each and every one of our listeners. I thank to our live viewers as well for watching our little sliver of the internet. Check out soon. I do have an interview with Midwest filmmaker Tony Wash of The Rake, High on the Hog, Skeletons in the Closet. We just catch up, basically talk about indie filmmaking, the state of where it is with the pandemic, what he might have coming up in his work that he's currently doing with Bloody Disgusting, which is very, very interesting. So that interview, look for that to drop later this week. And with that, next week, we will be looking at a more talked about Lance Henriksen film, Near Dark, which has an Aliens reunion by far in it. So stay tuned for that discussion. And now we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
And now, Petty, so glad you stuck around. I hope you stuck around to answer your question. What I felt of removal of the character Mira in Aquaman 2. First, I didn't realize it was going to be official. If they have decided yet or not, but if they did decide it, wouldn't it be cancellation in reverse? It might be, the problem, the thing with me is with films, and Ian, you can jump into, is a separation of reality and the film. Some people can do it, some people can't. For me, I'm like, if they already shot it and she's there, I know with digital technology, and there's a 3 million person petition signed to digitally enter Bruce Campbell in as Mira, which, as hilarious as that is, I want a DC film to be successful, and that would not make it successful. That would make it a complete joke.
Yeah, we shouldn't indulge in like meme filmmaking. The Snyder Cut is one thing, where it's a fan petition to bring something into existence that didn't happen, that didn't already exist. But this is a movie that I assume Aquaman 2 is filmed or somewhere
it's in the can. It's, as far as I'm aware, it's in the can,
right?
Because it was going to come out this year, but they delayed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cute idea, and Bruce Campbell's awesome and all that stuff, but just let it be. And I don't think DC or Warner Brothers would seriously consider something like that anyway, because honestly, how many of those 3 million people are actually going to buy tickets to see the movie in the theater versus waiting the month maybe until it's on HBO Max?
2 months, yeah, maybe a month. I mean, Lost City is now on streaming on Amazon Prime, and I was like, wait, that was just in the theater last month.
I know. Secrets of Dumbledore is already on HBO Max, and that was in
that
theaters like a month
me.
ago. Yeah.
That surprised me quite a
So
bit.
yeah, it's not going to happen. And as far as like again, I understand the position that Warner Brothers is in because with the Depp Heard trial ending last week, she has become a national villain. A lot of ugly things came out about both of them during this whole affair, and I feel
Right.
like Johnny Depp's going to be fine because they're already talking about Disney is courting him possibly for Pirates, even though they, you know, shit canned him during all this stuff when they thought he was guilty, and it turns out he's, not as bad as what he was portrayed at the outset of this whole thing, maybe. So I think it's just kind of sleazy. But if they do put out this movie with Mira and all the Amber Heard stuff intact, they risk people boycotting it. But again, I don't know how much that's going to affect people who just want to fucking go see Aquaman.
And that's the thing is people going to see Aquaman aren't going for Amber Heard, going to see Amber Heard. Now, I don't know how much of a role she would play into. I mean, she did play a major role in one, but her character, the way the writing had led to, felt like it might be a reduced role anyway in Aquaman 2. And I've heard now that they either could reduce her role or cut her out. I'm like, I would rather have them keep the film complete than them figure out a way to try to cut her out and end up having the story possibly go, there's something missing here, because I've seen films like that to where they tried to cut.
Morbius.
Yeah, oh, oh, oh. It got released a second time and still failed. Thank you. I did not want that precedent. I really, because no one asked for it, even though Morbin Time was viral and there's all kinds of groups and memes. No one asked for them to re-release. I mean, the studio was like, "Oh, maybe if we re-release, people will go see it." And guess what? Even fewer people went to see it. It's like, why, why? Go away, go
Especially
away.
because is it on digital already?
Yeah,
Or
it was,
okay.
and it took up a screen where they could have put, Crimes of the Future or something, for people to watch and walk out. At least that's something different than bringing it back because Morbin Time was a viral thing.
I missed it. What was the whole Morbin Time thing?
It just started as a meme and it just grew. My kid was quoting with it constantly. He watched Morbius with me streaming and he realized he got a kick of how campy and ridiculous it was. Morbius is quickly becoming the Room of superhero films. I mean,
But I don't think that's fair. It's not a good movie, but
it's not a good bad movie. It's
it's not
not.
a good bad movie. And I think it's not
Yeah.
a good movie, but part of that and most of that I blame on the editing. I
Oh
think
yeah. No,
you released a 3-hour cut of this movie that I'm sure is out there and let people evaluate it on those merits, and I guarantee it's going to be held in like legitimately higher esteem.
oh
Not as
no.
like grand art, but like certainly as like a mid-tier comic book movie and not like as a joke.
Oh no, and absolutely, and I said it even in my review, my 1 minute review. It felt like a huge amount of that film was on the cutting room floor somewhere.
Yeah.
It really did. It felt like some studio execs came in and go, we got to whittle it down. We got too much like character stuff in here. We just need to get to more action. You know what I mean? Because it felt like that. I'm like, oh, we got to get it. We got to get connected so we could possibly set up a Sinister Six. So let's throw Michael Keaton in at the very end. We threw him in on the trailer. So yeah, we got to put him in here. And his entrance made no sense. And the after credit sequence made even less sense. I mean, that was not a note you would want to end an already shaky film on, is that one, to where people were like, huh? What the hell? Where'd that come from, man? Penny was also wondering, Mr. Simmons, if you were going to do a show on the unbearable weight of massive talent or not.
Uh it
It's out on
depends.
streaming now. So
It's on streaming. Okay.
yeah, it is out on streaming now. I don't know what the cost is for rental it, but if you do one, I'll be happy to hop in on that conversation because I loved that movie. So for many reasons, probably not the correct reasons as a critic, but I like that movie.
Well, Petty, I can't deny you anything. So the answer is yes. It's been a weird year. I can't believe it's June already.
Yeah, it
And
is.
and Mark and I have talked about this and I've talked about this with other people, but like there's so much stuff out there that I want to see, but I don't go out to movies as much as I used to, and I don't go to a lot of critic screenings anymore. So it's kind of like, well, plus all this stuff comes out within a month or 6 weeks of
I'm
being in the
streaming, yeah.
theaters, so I can just rent it or wait till award season. But yeah, this is a movie that I wanted to see, and I do want to see still. So yeah, Mark, probably in July, I imagine. I know that's a ways away, but like June is completely booked up as far as content that I'm putting out.
Sure.
But yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to pencil that in for next month. So stay tuned.
There you go. And like I said, if you need someone, I'll
No, I'm
always
doing it with
be
you,
up
Mark.
for it. Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm committing you to this project.
Okay. I will be on the podcast. That's awesome. Didn't even realize I was there, but okay. And no need to apologize, Petty. We appreciate you regularly tuning into both our streams. I'm sure I speak for Mr. Simmons as well. We love comments. You always bring interesting discussions. And it's okay that it's off topic. That's why we have editing later on. And you are very kind as well. Thank you for the kind words, Petty. We appreciate the support. I appreciate the support of everyone who's tuned into our live across our three sources: YouTube's, the Twitch, and the Facebook, which I was told someone found it entertaining. I was trying to stream Fortnite, and I had never played Fortnite before. My computer, unfortunately, could not handle streaming and playing Fortnite. But I did for a very short time. And as I was talking, they were finding it quite humorous that I was like, what the hell is this? Or what the hell is this? So they for the amount that I was able to play it before it totally puked on me, they found it entertaining. So yeah, occasionally I do. But thank you, Twitch viewers out there, YouTubers, Facebookers, everybody. We are coming up on episode 400 in a little over 2 months. Probably in August, we are going to hit episode 400. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. Hop on our Facebook group, Special Mark Productions, folks. If you join that, we'll let you in. And yeah, that's where you can catch all things, I guess, of stuff I'm working on. And you can make comments of what you'd like to see for our 400th episode of the Spoiler Room. Not as many as Mr. Ian puts out. I will never be able to catch up to him, but
that's not something to aspire to.
But
I'm never going to snort as much coke as that guy. I'm such a loser.
No. When I snort coke, I only do it off of the backsides of prostitutes. No, anyway, in true 80s fashion. I mean, that's the only way 80s could do that. Anyway, I don't know what we're doing for episode 400. It is happening this year. Another milestone that I never thought I would be doing. And the only reason I am doing it is because of all you fine listeners and folks and good people like Ian here, who for some reason keep wanting to be on the show. I appreciate you all very, very much. And yeah, there's some things coming for the rest of the year, and I'm already planning for next year as well. So stay tuned, folks, and have a good night, one and all. Stay safe.
Cheers.
And we're going to end